So, a lot of times people talk about wealth management and they say, what is wealth management? What's a wealth manager? And I think it can be confusing. There's financial advisors, there's investment representatives, there's wealth managers.
I think a lot of people think wealth management is just your investments.
Asset management.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So you're an investment manager.
Yeah, and I think, for us anyway, when we say wealth management, we think about a lot of different things. We, one, we're CRM. We're contact relationship management. We're, I always like to say, if we're the quarterback, well, we've got a whole team, but it's important that somebody knows who to throw the ball to. So in contact relationship management, what that really means is we're communicating with the CPA.
Correct.
We're communicating with the estate attorney. Sometimes we might do that in-house, but sometimes we might be reaching out to other professionals on somebody's team.
And, those relationships are more successful because it's a cohesive unit. We're all moving in the same direction together.
Yeah, we may not always disagree, but the client actually benefits from the debate.
Correct.
We get a better outcome when we debate. We don't, take one person's word for it. We say, what do you think? And here's what I believe. A state attorney might say, well, I disagree. But we all get better because of it. So there's that CRM, that contact relationship management, kind of the whole team putting our arms around the client. Then there is asset management. But asset management, isn't necessarily just traditional stocks and bonds. Clients own real estate. Clients own private equity. They might own private debt. They might have, structured notes and CDs and cash at the bank and accounts that might be coming to them at some future date through inheritance. It's important that, we take it all into account in a plan so we can see the whole picture. Anything else you would add to that in terms of, what asset management is versus?
Well, yeah, because, excuse me, asset management, it might not just be something that's in-house too. You might have somebody that has a 401k. Well, we don't want to leave that out of the equation because that's, a lot of times that is a client's most, their largest asset, one of their largest assets. And then so we need to consider that into their overall investment portfolio and make sure that they're also cohesive and they're moving in the same direction.
Could be stock options, could
correct.
be grants.
Benefit programs, any corporate benefit programs. It could be real estate. So if they're invested in real estate outside of their investment, their investment management,
sure, then,
that all needs to be a consideration as well. Because, you probably don't want to have you don't want to have real estate weighted too much in their investment portfolio if they already have real estate holdings outside of that.
Right. And in some of our other conversations and other podcasts, other blogs, we've talked a bit about the different types of investor that you're working with. And there can be, our more complicated clients, there could be heirloom real estate. There could be trusts that have not maybe been sealed up just right, where we can identify that there's an issue when we see the whole picture.
Right.
And then last, there's the taxation portion. Not really last, but there's the taxation portion. So, when we're buying and selling, how is that going to impact the portfolio? Who's the best person to talk that through? Is the CPA the only person? Not always. There could be a business manager that knows there's something coming down the pipe for the company, and that hasn't made it to the CPA yet. So the wealth manager, in our experience anyway, and at least in the way we work, we're talking to all those folks all the time and trying just to be, first to hear the information so that we can disseminate it into our client's outcome.
Right. And let's not forget about, the estate portion of it. How are we helping them with their estate attorney set up their estate plan? And then when something does happen, how are we distributing that out to the heirs or the charities, or we're providing income to certain people? And so that all has to be considered.
That just kind of, that comes back to the fourth category, which is where we need to be in the loop, but obviously we're gonna rely on that professional. So asset protection. And asset protection it kind of encompasses a number of things. First of all, it's your private lines insurance. Who's managing the insurance on your home, on your cars? Do you have enough of a deductible on your auto insurance that your liability umbrella is actually going to work? Because we've actually seen it before and caught it, where an umbrella was dependent on having a certain type of deductible on their auto, or it didn't work. And so private lines, personal insurance, business insurance, asset protection from that perspective, who's going to fix a problem when it arises from the point of insurance? And then there's the estate planning and or corporate attorney, and how are they building in protections?
Yeah. And let's not forget about healthcare.
Oh,
that's
boy.
a huge asset. Well, that's a huge way to protect your assets.
Yeah, by not having to pay the bill yourself.
Right. Unless you're self-insured, but there's a lot of times that many aren't.
I'm going to call you out on that.
Okay.
No such thing as self-insurance. Self-pay.
Self-pay.
But not self-insurance.
Semantics.
It is not semantics. If I pay it myself, I'm writing a check. If the insurance pays it, they're writing the check.
That's true. Absolutely.
So,
yeah. And then, wealth management, aside from all of these structural aspects that we've discussed,
right?
There's the behavioral
Oh,
and
boy.
the psychological. I mean, that could be a whole podcast on its own. But how often would you say that when you're speaking with a client, in general, how often are you talking about the structural, technical part of investing and managing their assets, and how often are you talking about emotions or feelings
Or family.
or
the dynamics that are happening in their life? I mean, really, we talk about investments for probably 20 minutes of a 1 hour conversation.
Right.
It's important, but really all those other things that come into play. Asset management, when you've been in the business as long as we have, let's just face it, it's second nature.
Right.
We're looking at the risk tolerance of the client. We're looking at the time frame, because risks can be different based on time. How the different buckets are invested to meet the different needs. And frankly, we're doing that already. From a conversation standpoint, it's pretty cut and dry. We can get to that real quick. Now, if I'm talking to a client and they say, you remember that when X stock did Y, I made you sell, and I really regret that. Well, that's a great time to say, well, are you going to do that again? Should I expect that from you again? Because if that's going to happen again, and I put you in a position to do that same thing all over again, then now it's kind of shame on me, right? I should be paying attention to my client and understanding that maybe they just can't handle a certain level of risk, and they're going to force us to do something at the wrong time if we allow them to own a certain type of investment. There's so many ways to the same goal, right? I mean, you can get there in the fast lane, you can get there in the slow lane, but if along the way you don't run into a pothole, you run into a car accident, then we have a real issue.
Right.
It's funny, we were talking the other day, and I forget how many times I've used this analogy, but we always say, if you're going from Scottsdale office to Sun City, what lane of the traffic are you going to get in?
I'm definitely getting in that HOV lane.
HOV lane, baby. And if you're going 80 miles an hour, you're getting passed.
Right. Of course. It's the 101.
But why did you get in the HOV lane?
Because I have a long way to go.
Okay.
And I want to get there quickly with the least resistance.
Now, when you get to your ramp, are you going to wait until the ramp's a quarter mile and you're going to cross 5 lanes of traffic?
Well, no, not technically. I'm going to start easing over pretty slowly so that, I'm not going to cause a wreck, or I'm not going to put myself in danger.
Right. So that's really de-risking your portfolio. When you think about when you're investing, let's say I've got 20 years to go. If I can keep you in the seat, then the best thing for me to do is have you 100% in stocks, right? Mm-hmm. And as you get closer and closer to that goal, we start to slow down and get into the slower lanes, so we have a safe exit. We don't necessarily want to go from stocks to cash right at the last minute, because there could be an accident. If the market's falling right at the time when I need my money, obviously that's not going to work out so well. So we're going to slowly de-risk the portfolio as you get closer to your goal.
Right.
I don't know why I went on that tangent, but I was just reminded of that story.
Yeah, it's all part of wealth management. It's an important part. You know, what are the conversations that you have on the process of, you know, say you're onboarding a new client.
Sure.
And then, you know, what does that look like, wealth management versus investment management? An advisor that focuses mostly on investment management. What are the differences and what does that process look like?
Well, I'll in one swoop, I'll tell you how a lot of advisors still do it, and frankly, how I was taught to do it, and then where we are today. You know, the old way was client comes in, they have their statements, they hand it to you. You have a 10-minute conversation about them and their risk. If the markets happen to be doing well, they're going to tell you they're a high-risk investor. If the markets are down, they're going to tell you they're conservative. They're going to tell you whatever is the mood right now.
The client.
It's a false way to get a risk tolerance, right? But the advisor that listens to them, myself included, when I was new, it was what we were taught to do. Granted, that was almost 25 years ago, but then we look at the statements and we say, oh, I see this is doing well. Oh, yeah, you could have done better here. I can see some ways that we could really make a difference. And it could be, I would love to believe that it's honest. I mean, certainly when we said it, it was honest. We thought we could do better. And then we would tell the client what we could do. And we would say, let's do this. You ready to go?
Right.
And they'd sign paperwork and we'd be off and running. 2-3 meetings, we've already got everything transferred. We've already invested the money.
Well, and think about this. With all of the different investment choices out there, how easy is it to have the same objective but different choices?
So easy.
Right?
I mean, I could do it all with this mutual fund company.
Right.
I could do it all in individual stocks and bonds. I could do it all with a variable annuity product with separate pools inside, right? So many different angles. Some are tax deferred. Some are tax now. Yeah. I mean, I always kind of think of it, the person that runs the stage.
Right.
They've got all these cords they can pull depending on how they want to portray the outcome. But how different is that from what we do now, right?
Right, exactly.
So now, if you walk into our office, the very first meeting, whether it's a call or a first appointment, we're just going to have a conversation and see if we're a good fit. If you're a good fit for me, if I'm a good fit for you, you're a good fit for our team, right? We're going to be really choosy on who comes in our house, and also if we can actually do a good service for this client.
Right.
It's also very different that we've got plenty of food on the table now. In the old days,
yeah, it's true.
We needed lots of folks to just try and keep the balls rolling, right?
Right. But if they're not a good fit, we're going to always leave them better than we found them.
Always leave them better.
And help them find someone who is a good fit for them.
And isn't that fun? I mean, we still do that. If we get some young person, per se, that was referred by one of our current clients, if we don't think we can give them value yet because they just don't have enough complexity, we'll tell them how to get started at Vanguard or tell them how to get started at Fidelity and build their wealth until they do need us.
Right.
And it's kind of like putting out the campfire and throwing the dirt on it before you leave. You don't want to be that person that doesn't take care of things.
Exactly.
We but today, so we have that initial meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We tell them, here's the things we're going to need to look at so that we can get a good picture. We need to see your taxes. We need to see your current investments. If you have a current financial plan, which is frankly rare.
Very rare. Their trust.
We tell them to bring that, their trust paperwork, benefits from their employer, any 401k plans, any stock options. There's a litany of things, probably
business
13,
ownership.
14 items. The way ownership is structured.
Right.
They bring all that in.
Right.
We simply hand it off to our team to scan it. We go into an appointment, and we're in that appointment for an hour and a half to 2 hours, first visit. And we're just asking all kinds of questions. If we're here 3 years from now, we're looking back, what has to happen for you to feel like it's been a success personally and financially? So we actually know how we can win. if we don't know how we can win for this client, then how do we begin?
Yeah.
And then we ask questions about their children, their animals, their, do they have an alma mater that's important to them? Is charitable giving important? If so, who is it? Is tithing important, or is that not a factor? Are there certain things you want to own or don't want to own? What are some of the other questions that you can think of that are pertinent?
What money means to them. For some, that's purely security. They just want to know that they can go to sleep at night and not have to worry if they're going to have money 10 or 15 years down the road, especially those retired people. And some, they want to accumulate more. Some, they want to leave a legacy for the generations behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Some want to go buy some fun stuff and live it up. They're not necessarily worried about leaving a legacy for their friend. They're like, we worked from nothing to this, and we're going to enjoy the fruits of our labor. So everyone, that's the coolest thing that we found.
Are you saying we should customize things?
I think I'm saying that.
I think that's what you said. So well, it's not a one size fits all?
No, okay. Not at all. Not at all. What I was getting to is everyone is different. And that could even be, the spouses or the partners together. They might have two completely different purposes for money.
They may even keep it in two separate buckets.
Right. And then if they don't, it's like, how do we marry that? Because, some like, well, I like to have my own account that I do my own investing in. And the other one's like, I don't want anything to do with that. So you have to think about, okay, so when something happens to you, the person has their play account,
mm-hmm.
how does your partner or your spouse take over?
Sure.
Yeah. So, understanding all these dynamics of partners, spouses, and then the family dynamics continuing on after that, and how the client wants that to translate down to their heirs. I mean, it's complex.
Sure.
And it's different for every single person.
And so basically after we've asked all those questions, we've gone very deep. I think currently, I think on average we probably ask between 75 and 100 questions just to make sure we know this client. We've even had, how many times has the client said, you know me better than my financial advisor of 10 years? We get this a lot because we've actually gone deep on who they are and how they think about money, how they think about their investments, what's important to them. Then the part they're always stunned by, we say, we'll get back to you after we've had a chance to actually review it. And so then we take a look at their investments. We look at their, does their trust line up with their values and what they told us they wanted? Does we have a whole legal team at our broker-dealer that looks at that. We can also get second opinions from our attorney friends. What are you laughing at?
And is their trust even up to date?
Is it up to date?
Oh, we had it done like 15 years ago where there's been legislation changes and tax law changes.
Is the beneficiary my ex-wife?
Right. And, they've had children or, someone that was in the trust is now out of the trust. So there's so many dynamics to it.
So we gather all that up, and then we actually do look at the statements. We do look at the trust. We look at, all those different dynamics. And then assuming we feel like we can add value, we have the client come back in, and we basically go over what changes we would make, how we would handle their investments, what the service experience is that they can expect from us, and frankly, what the service experience is that they want. I tend to find that the more money clients have, almost the less they want to talk to you, and only when it's important, because they want to go run their business or they want to go do their travel. So we get that service expectation. We have another meeting with them. We now call that the mutual commitment meeting. If they sign everything, and we get the transfers rolling, we're pulling in the accounts, we're getting the third-party authorization signed so we can talk to their attorney and their CPA, or we're introducing them to our team. It's a beautiful thing. That whole process, that first process, as cumbersome as it is, I think I get the most juice out of that because you're really learning who this person is and
right.
Building up a process to have maximum impact for them to get the results that they've been looking for.
Right. And it doesn't just stop there, obviously.
No.
We have continual conversations. Every year we have a strategy meeting. What's changed? What are you looking in the future for? What can we be doing to help you reach your new goals and your new expectations? Or, hey, you're retiring. That's awesome. That's a big transition period, which, again, that's a whole separate podcast. But
well, I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. I'm going to have a meeting in a couple weeks with a client that's been with us from a previous firm that has been with us for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, those relationships, that nurturing that goes on and that trust that's built mutually over time by doing what you said you were going to do, and they have met their goals and everything is really happening and they have that confidence. I mean, there's not much to be more proud of.
Right. And we've seen and experienced with them so many different life events, and, ultimately that translate into managing their wealth as encompassing as it is.
I mean, I think that's another part of, frankly, when somebody's interviewing an advisor, if you can't spend an hour in a room with them just because they make you crazy, every once in a while you meet somebody and you're like, I think they're really smart, but I don't really want to, it needs to feel like that relationship where you can spend time with them,
right,
and have deep conversations and, call them out if you think there's something that they need to answer.
Open and honest communication. Yeah.
Like a marriage.
Exactly. 28 years. So I think to wrap up, I think we've explained very well that wealth management is just not managing the investment part of your business.
It's not asset management. Right. It's managing the whole financial well-being of the client.
Right.
And making sure all the different team members are communicating for a better outcome.
Sounds wonderful.
Awesome. Well, it's been a good visit, and I'm looking forward to our next podcast.
Me too.